As I said, my name is Frank. I'm one of the pastors. If you're new or if you've been here a while, I'd love to talk to you. I'll be after the service and would love to hear what God's doing in your life. We're in a series about faith, and it sounds so simple. We're about faith. Well, the reality is God has given us truth. We have to decide if we're going to embrace that truth, change it, modify it, but He only gives us the option of accepting or rejecting. And yet for us, sometimes it's so hard. So we're going to look at that today. We've been looking at mentors from the Old Testament, men and women, or men primarily in this series, who left us these writings, left us these truths, left us what they discovered in their walk with God, and they're mentoring us through the Word of God. People who did extraordinary things as God worked through them and around them, just regular folks who had an encounter with God that changed their lives. These people were considered superheroes of the faith, people with supernatural powers that changed the world. As we study them, we see ourselves. Why did they have so much faith? Why did they do exactly what God told them to do? I mean, Abraham was ready to sacrifice Isaac. We talked about that last week. He was ready to do it because God had told him to. Now, I admit that's a great reason, but I wonder if I would have failed that test. We look at them and we wonder if we had that much faith. What did they have? What do they have that we can learn from? Well, the reality is Abraham wasn't just bestowed with that faith. He built it time after time after time with experience after experience. Each experience built a foundation of trust for the next experience. Every time God told him something was going to happen, it happened. There's something about watching your 100-year-old wife have a baby that tells you God can do what He wants to do. Abraham learned over time not to trust only the promise, but the one who makes the promise. We talked last week about the key point is not whether you believe the promise. The question is, do you believe the promise giver behind the promise? He learned to trust and follow even when he didn't understand, when he didn't feel like it, and when he didn't agree with it. Last week, we looked at Abraham and Isaac. We looked at how those events foreshadowed the future events of Jesus on the cross. We're going to see in this series that the Old Testament points to Jesus over and over and over and over. Every story in the Bible from beginning to end is about Jesus. Abraham's near sacrifice of his son Isaac is a direct reference to God's sacrifice of His son 2,000 years later. A substitute was found for Isaac, but Jesus was our substitute. My prayer is that we'll see the faith of these incredible people and begin to have a deeper faith and a deeper trust in the promises that have been given to us. Today, we're going to jump back into Abraham's life, but we're going to look at a moment that wasn't exactly his shining moment. It's my favorite story about Abraham. It actually is, because he reminds me of me. One moment, a spiritual warrior with all kinds of faith, and the next moment doing something so stupid and not knowing exactly where that came from. How do I have the potential to be so incredible for a brief second moment and be so stupid most of the time? That's exactly what Abraham does. But before we get there, I need to tell you a story. When I was a child, 5 years old, I didn't want to be Superman. I thought I was Superman. No doubt. It wasn't like, oh, wow, I want to be. No. I figured if he can do it, why can't I, right? I mean, he's Superman. I love Superman. I thought I had the same powers. Really thought I had the same powers. I had unwavering faith in Superman. I love that Clark Kent was just this normal guy who held a huge secret. He was invincible. He was unafraid. He was unwavering. He had supernatural powers. At any moment, he could do anything. He had no fear, no anxiety, no concerns. He was faster than a speeding bullet. more powerful than a locomotive, able to stop or leap tall buildings in a single bound. truth, justice, the American way. He was Superman. I loved everything about him. I mean, if I could grow up and be Superman, I mean, nothing could be better. Why not? If Clark Kent could do it, so could I. I truly believed as a 5-year-old that I had the incredible powers that just needed to be released. If I would just step out in faith, great things would happen. I didn't have a phone booth, so I used my closet. 1 minute, 5-year-old Frank. Next minute, from the closet comes Superman Frank. So why not test the cape, right? I climbed up on top of my bunk bed, fully expected to fly. No hesitation, no fear. My only concern was that if I couldn't contain my flight within my bedroom, then I would let the secret out that I had supernatural powers. After the trip to the emergency room to get stitches above my eye, I began to realize that maybe I wasn't a superhero after all. It's devastating to come to that truth. But the desire to be a superhero has never left me. Even to this day, something in me said it was possible to live with supernatural power. So I knew it. Inside of me, somehow I knew it was possible. That I could live in this world and be unaffected by the world and the events that occur in it. That I could become something greater than myself for a greater purpose. What I didn't realize at the age of 5 is that my desire to be a superhero was placed in me by God. I've always had a desire to live a life of supernatural power. That's why I love the stories of the Old Testament. Normal people, messed up people, transformed into superheroes of the faith. Not because of an encounter in a phone booth, but rather an encounter with a very real and very incredible God. He takes the ordinary through a series of encounters to build incredible faith in people. They become faith superheroes, invincible, unafraid, supernaturally gifted, and forever changed. They truly believe the promises of God, and they believe that if God said he's going to do it, he's going to do it, and if God tells them to do something, they can do it. God made promises to them, and they walk those promises out in their faith. That's why they are faith superheroes. By studying other people of incredible faith, my prayer is that we'll see our faith in a new way. These men of the Old Testament, they were just normal men with incredible flaws, horrible sins. And God used them to change the world. And if he'll allow it, I think he wants to do the same thing with you and me today too. Let's go back and look at Abraham again. Abraham was a descendant of Shem, one of Noah's sons who lived in a place called Ur. We talked about that last week. He had 2 brothers, one of whom died. Abraham and Sarah took their nephew as they were without children, and his name was Lot. God spoke to Abraham, told him to leave Ur and go to the place that God would show him. God promised to bless him and make his descendants not only great, but a great multitude who'd be blessed by God. Genesis 12:1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abraham leaves it all behind. Abraham took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people and they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. God shows Abraham the promised land. And just when Abraham and his family are about to experience the promises of God, just when they obey God and do exactly what he said to do, disaster strikes. Genesis 12, now there was a famine in the land. Imagine what Abraham has to be thinking. I just left home. I left everybody I knew, everything I knew, because God, you said you'd take me to a place that's a promised place that you'll show me. And we get here, and it's a barren land in the middle of a famine. My family's going to starve, and I brought them down here. It had to shake his faith a little bit. Why would God bring him here, say he'd be blessed, and then allow this to happen? You see, I thought if I followed God, I'd have a wrinkle-free life. Never seen that in the scriptures. Genesis 12:10. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Abraham takes everybody to Egypt. Egypt could survive famines because of the Nile River. So when trial comes, Abraham flees to Egypt, a place of trouble, a place, an evil place where people often go to trying to find refuge. Full of godless men, ruthless leaders, terrible pharaohs, but yet they have the Nile. And because of that, people go to Egypt. It always symbolizes in Scripture a false place of security. Remember that I said that sometimes our biblical heroes do totally stupid things? Abraham's about to reveal his lack of faith in God, and this is actually reassuring to me in so many ways. I'm so glad God included these things in the Scriptures. Of all the Abraham stories, this one's my favorite. He's about to do something so incredibly dumb after encountering God that it makes me feel good. I hate to say it, but I cherish his failures because it makes them human. It gives me hope that God may be able to use me too in the midst of all my stupid things that I do. Fortunately, mine aren't written down in the most important book ever in the history of mankind, but they're there. Genesis 12:11. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarah, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. They will kill me, but they'll let you live. Say you're my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. Can you imagine this? He turns to his wife and says, hey, I got an idea. Let's pretend like we're not married. And see, that's going to help me. It may not help you, but it's going to help me. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep and oxen and male donkeys and male servants and female donkeys and camels. Abraham is doing great. His sister wife is in Pharaoh's castle, but he's being blessed with all kinds of stuff. Notice that when God's people go to Egypt, they tend to leave with a lot of possessions. Something we'll pay attention to in a bit. Do you remember when God promised to bless Abraham and his descendants no matter what Abraham did? I think Abraham's testing that promise right here. The covenant of God was unilateral. I'm going to bless you even if you do something this stupid. Because Abraham didn't trust God, he chose to act on his own. His wife Sarah, who God had promised to bless, was now the property of Pharaoh, and she's his slave. Imprisoned in a life of luxury, but imprisoned nonetheless. Even though Abraham put her there with his own stupidity, God's determined to rescue her and keep his promises and covenant. In the meantime, Abraham prospers while in Egypt. Genesis 12:17, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, his wife. Note that the plagues are plural here. Great plagues, one after the other. Verse 18, so Pharaoh called Abram and he said, what have you done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So I took her as my wife. Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Doesn't seem fair, does it? Don't you feel sorry for Pharaoh a little bit here? I mean, Abraham lied. Sarah went along with it. Pharaoh didn't know, and yet he's the one that suffered the plagues. In any event, Pharaoh sends Abraham and his family and all their possessions out of Egypt. So Abraham went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the Negev, which is the desert between Egypt and the Promised Land. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. Abraham takes his family and all his many possessions and he heads to the Negev. And the Negev is a desert on the way to the land God has promised. Eventually they reach their destination. As he journeyed on from Negev as far as Bethel to a place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he'd made an altar at first, and there Abraham called on the name of the Lord. Is this story starting to sound familiar? God's family and the land he'd given them experienced a famine, flee to Egypt to get food. Pharaoh enslaved someone, luxury, but nonetheless enslaved. They prosper in Egypt and become wealthy. They're enslaved, and God uses plagues against Pharaoh to free them. The entire family leaves Egypt with Pharaoh's permission and flees to the land God promised them through the desert. Have we seen that before? Abraham's story is a foreshadowing of Abraham's future family, one that hasn't been born yet. This time it's the mother of the Jewish nation who's enslaved. Next time it'll be Joseph, Israel's favorite son, who we'll talk about next week. And eventually the entire Jewish family of God will be enslaved in Egypt. Next week we're going to look at the story of Joseph, the multicolored coat Joseph. Not Joseph, the father of Jesus, the earthly father of Jesus. But we're going to see that Joseph is sold into slavery, becomes part of Pharaoh's servants, and severe famine brings his family, God's family, to Egypt to survive. They prosper and are so blessed they begin to outnumber the Egyptians, and so they enslave them to keep them under control. God told Abraham this was going to happen, another promise that God said would come true. Look at this, verse 13. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that's not theirs, and will be servants there, and they'll be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation they serve, and afterwards they'll come out with great possessions. God's telling Abraham, look, there's a future generations coming back to Egypt. What happened to you in Egypt is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen to the entire Jewish nation. They too will be in Egypt because of a famine. They will be enslaved by Pharaoh, a new Pharaoh, for 400 years. Then God says, I'll bring judgment on Egypt. They'll come out with great possessions. And like Abraham, they'll have a desert experience on the way to the promised land. It's pretty cool, right? You're starting to see themes run through the Bible, one story foreshadowing the next. It gets better. It turns out that this story is not just a foreshadowing of the Jewish Exodus. The story of Abraham and Sarah in Egypt is pointing to the story of Jesus. Like every story in the Old Testament points to Jesus. All the Old Testament points to. Let's look at how Matthew describes it. When Jesus was about 2 years old, the wise men came to worship him. They brought gold and frankincense and myrrh. You probably know the story. Herod killed all the babies under 2 in Bethlehem. Matthew 13, now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, rise and take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. It's not a physical famine this time that drives Jesus to Egypt. It's a spiritual one. Jesus was born just as things seemed to be getting started. God reveals to Joseph, you got to go to Egypt. The gifts of the wise men help fund that trip. God always provides for what he calls for. Remember, they're on the mountain of the one that provides. We learned that last week. Verse 14, and he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Hosea 11:1, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Next week, we're going to look at the story of Joseph and how it foreshadows the life of Jesus. So the father of the Jewish nation, Abraham, flees to Egypt. The son Joseph will flee to Egypt. The Messiah God will flee to Egypt, each foreshadowing what's to come. Egypt was a corrupt, godless nation. And God rescues his people from there over and over and over. One day it's going to represent how he rescues all of us from an evil and corrupt world. God equates Egypt with some of the most sinful places on earth. There's going to be a point in our future, a point in Revelation, when there are two witnesses proclaiming the truth of God's word, and the world's going to become so abominable, so anti-God, so against God, they're going to slay the two witnesses. Right there in the middle of the city of David, of Jerusalem. But look at what God says. And when they'd finished their testimonies, the beast that arise from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the streets of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. In other words, the Holy Land has become so ungodly, it's the same as Sodom or Egypt. God will one day finally call his people out of Egypt and completely destroy everything it stands for. Themes run through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. I talk about that all the time. This book is woven. Things run. Scriptures point to future scriptures. Moments foreshadow future moments. That's God's promise to all of us, and what I believe he wants us to embrace today. Every detail in Abraham and Sarah's life is carefully orchestrated for a specific purpose by God. These ordinary people, despite their mistakes, despite their weaknesses, despite their sins, despite their humanism, become heroes of the faith. God wanted to see their lives. He not only had control of the past and present, but he knows the future too. It's not difficult to read the Old Testament and not see that we serve a sovereign God who has everything under his control. Nothing happens that he doesn't allow. And when things happen, they're exactly the way he designed them to happen, even down to the smallest details. Let me remind you of one of God's promises, or a few. For I, the Lord, do not change. I, the Lord, do not change. The same God that rescued them from Egypt is in your life, ready to rescue you too. He never changes. He'll be the same in the future as he is today. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. James 1:17, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there's no variation or shadow due to change. Our God never changes. So God promised, I'll never change. The same thing he did in Abraham's time, he's doing right now. Taking ordinary people who are messed up and gradually building them through experiences to begin to understand and have incredible faith in a journey with God. God is who he is, who he says he is, and he's going to do what he said he's going to do. And just as he's building Abraham into a spiritual superhero, he's doing the same thing for you and me today. He may not take you and I to Egypt to escape the famine, be refreshed in the waters of the Nile, but he does take us on a spiritual famine and the evil one who desires to kill us and brings us to a place of spiritual food and refreshing waters of the Holy Spirit. God used Abraham to rescue Sarah, the mother of the Jewish nation. God's used Joseph to rescue the brothers of the 12 tribes of Israel. God used Moses to rescue the Jewish nation. God used Jesus to rescue the world. And God wants you and I to rescue each other. God has entrusted the message of Jesus to us for the purpose of sharing it and rescuing other people. He found each of us just like he found Abraham. He revealed himself to us. He's gifted us. He's empowered us. He's made promises to us. Promises he will keep. He's intimately involved in the details of our lives, just as he's always been. Can you imagine how differently we would live if we could actually embrace every single truth of God's word? Every single truth. What is we could really grasp if we're working out and participating in a plan that God had from all of eternity? You see, we think we're here doing our thing. We're not. We're here doing his thing. All around us. And God's calling you to join him in what he's already doing. He's already decided what's best and what needs to happen. And he'll use the events of the past to point to events in our lives. And we'll use the events of our lives today to foreshadow what's to come in the future. He's never stopped working. He's never changed. Everything we see in our world was in detail foreshadowed or specifically stated in Scripture. Can you imagine how differently we live if we embrace the truth of God and all his promises? I love that the superheroes were normal people one moment and then instantly transformed into Superman. I think the reason I could see that happening to me, 1 minute normal, well, relatively normal 5-year-old, next moment Superman. Normal people, messed up people who are transformed into superheroes of the faith. Not because of an encounter in a phone booth, but because an encounter with a very real and incredible God. He takes the ordinary and through a series of encounters begins to build incredible faith. Do you know what makes somebody a superhero of faith? Someone who actually believes that what God says about them is true. All of us have the power of God in us. All of us have promises of God on our lives, and they're true and they're never changing. We are superheroes of the faith. We've been empowered with the Holy Spirit. We no longer live for us, we live for Him. The old us is gone, the new is here. The new you is a superhero. Superheroes of faith, believers used by God who just believe. They become invincible, unafraid, supernaturally gifted, forever changed. I don't know about you, but that's how I want to live. I've wanted to live in that freedom since I was a small child. I wanted to live knowing the promises of God, knowing the one who promises and living in the freedom of that reality. I want to live unafraid and invincible. For years, I didn't know my desire to want to be a superhero came from God. Given to me because it's my destiny. I'm in possession of great superpowers that I didn't do. They were given to me by God. I'm empowered by the Holy Spirit. They didn't come from this world. I'm just a normal, flawed human who carries a very deep, resonant truth in my life. I'm invincible. I'm eternal. I'm always victorious, and I'm fearless. I'm a bulletproof. I'm in this world, but I'm not of it. My home is far away, and I've been sent here on a mission. Everything I ever need will be provided to me when I need it. I cannot fail at my mission because God's already completed it. That's right. Nothing can happen to me today or tomorrow that will ever change any of it. The only thing that determines how I live as the superhero that I am is my confidence in the promises of God's word, and yours too. We're all superheroes waiting to be unleashed, and the power that we unleash is based on the amount of faith we have in God's truth. It's that simple. Can you imagine how terrible it would have been for Clark Kent to never realize that he could transform into Superman? Imagine Clark Kent living his entire life just one phone booth away from supernatural powers, but he never knew it. Or he knew it and he never had the faith to act on it. Imagine that. Imagine if we never experienced all that God has for us because we never had the faith to believe in the power either. Imagine how terrible it would be to get to the end of our lives and realize God had all kinds of things in store for us, but we didn't have the faith to really believe Him. He's made His promises clear. We're going to spend a few moments. I'm going to remind you of some of those promises. You and I are spiritual beings sent from another home here to show others the way home. Only you can decide if you truly believe the promises of God. If you truly believe He has empowered you with powers that are beyond yourself. The scriptures are full of God's promises. I'm going to let the Word of God speak for the rest of this sermon. I'll let you look at the truths that He promises, and maybe you can realize the full potential that He put in you and me. You and I have supernatural powers just waiting to be released. We're going to spend the rest of this sermon just looking at the promises of God. And as we look at these, I want you to just think about, do I fully embrace those in my life? Do I know they're true? Am I willing to live that faith out? Because if you can embrace, trust with absolute unabandoned faith, the promises of God, your life will become invincible. Yes. Yes. Let's take a look at the slides. Be a superhero. From the time I was a small child, something in me said that I'm here for a greater purpose than just myself. Something told me that I'm here on a mission greater than just my life. There's nothing more fulfilling than to be on a mission of God, to be empowered by God, to be surrendered to God, and to have absolute total faith in every word that He says. Yes. It'll change the way you live. Yes, it will. You'll find yourself in circumstances and situations using powers that you don't know you have. You'll find yourself on a mission, understanding that what happens in this world is eternal lives of the people that we know. You and I have been placed on this planet, empowered by the Holy Spirit, to become superheroes of the faith. We're no different than Abraham and David and Joseph and Daniel and Isaac. We're the same. We're people just going through life, and for some reason, God has pulled us out and empowered us and said, okay, now you're mine. Go live like it. My prayer during this series is that by studying the mentors of the Old Testament, we'll be able to see ourselves and honestly become unleashed. Not unhinged, unleashed. We all have powers. Supernatural Spirit of God powers. What are they? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, forbearance, and self-control. Waiting, just waiting for us to unleash them. The scriptures tell us, if you abide in me, Jesus says, you will produce much fruit. In other words, if you embrace these truths and you spend time in the Word and you spend time with me and you go over and over and over those promises until you know that they're true, all of a sudden you're going to see spiritual fruit grow in your life like you've never seen before. And you're going to look back and go, why did I wait so long to be unleashed? That's my prayer. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your Word. I thank you for your truth. I thank you for everything that you give us. And God, forgive us when we look at your word and don't really believe it. When we think, oh, that's nice, but we never really empower that truth in our life. When we still live here just racked with anxiety and fear and all these things that you say, no, not for my children. My yoke is easy. Be anxious about nothing. So God, help us to begin to pour through these scriptures. Help us to begin to embrace them as true. Help us to begin to build our faith on nothing other than the truth that you've given us, God. You've sent us to this world on mission. We have a mission assignment. We have mission objectives. They all start with faith in the one who sent us. So God, as the man asked, he said, I want to believe. Please help my unbelief. We're here saying, God, please grow our faith. Grow our faith. Give us supernatural faith to believe in you no matter what our eyes see, no matter what the world tells us, no matter what's in front of us, that we have absolute unbridled faith because we too want to be your superheroes. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.